right, this is day 2 of chapter 3, section 1, quadratic functions. I am just going to briefly go over what we did on last class, so you could kind of see how we're doing it again and then answer some of the examples. So looking at this, graphs of quadratic functions, just a reminder what a quadratic function is. It's the little u's, okay? So 2.5, we did multiple functions, parent functions, and quadratic functions had the u. So make sure if you are graphing something, it has that u shape. Either it's going up or it's going down depending on what you had. So last class I said this is quadratic form, but we also call it standard form. So the word that we are going to be using, let's say on your test, we're going to call this standard form. So just cross out quadratic form. It's going to be referred to as standard form. So if it says write in standard form, this is the form it should be written in. Okay, so ax squared plus bx plus c, which we have always called it standard form. So we're going to continue calling it standard form. Okay, just to review, you have your axis of symmetry, which is your mirror point. Okay, if this point is 3 units from that side, then the other one is also 3 units. Sorry, let me zoom in. Axis of symmetry again, if it's 3 units from here, it's 3 units. Okay, that's my points when I'm graphing. Your vertex could either be a minimum, okay, your smallest unit, or your max unit. So depending on what the graph looks like, it's either at the very top or the very bottom, depending on how we're graphing it. So, all right, graphing an equation in standard form. So like I said, we're not really calling it quadratic form. This will be standard. Okay, graphing it in standard form. Remember, we have to remember what standard form is. And looking at it, it was an equation that we had. So standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. That's my standard form. And in order for us to find our vertex, we have to use this formula. Remember, vertex is represented as h and k, where h is my x value, k is my y value. So in order for me to solve for my vertex, this is what I'm using to solve for my h value, my x. I'm taking whatever my b is, and I'm making it negative. So negative b, keep in mind if this was a -6, it would be -6 over 2a, and then you're solving that way. Once you get that answer, you're going to then take that y or take that x value and plug it in for x to solve for your y or your k. So again, it just, you know, it just matters what your values are in order to solve that way. Okay. Then you have to find your y-intercept and your x-intercept. How am I finding my y-intercept? What you're doing in order to find your y-intercept is you are you plug in 0 for x. Keep in mind, if it's written in standard form, it's just your c value. Okay, and it's going to look something like this. 0c. Where am I getting that c from? Right here. Okay, so that should be pretty easy. Looking at the next one, if you need additional points, which you may not need additional points, but you will have to answer your x-intercepts, what you're doing is you're setting it equal to 0. You're taking your entire function and you're setting it equal to 0. Okay, so keep in mind when you're setting it equal to 0, you could either factor it, use the quadratic formula, or completing the squares. You have to remember how to do those 3. And I think that was in lesson 1.4. Okay, so I think it was 1.4 A, B, and C if I'm not mistaken. You could always go back and look. All right, when something's in, this we said was also called standard form, but we are officially calling it vertex form. So if something's written in vertex form, if you're looking at it, this is an easy way to find your vertex. That's why it's called vertex form. You're finding it by taking the vertex, which is h, k, and it's literally written in the formula. Okay, so wherever it is, that's where you're using. And your line of symmetry for both vertex and standard form is always your x value. Keep in mind you must write it as x equals whatever that number is. So this is kind of what we covered last class. Let's just go ahead and start finding information. So this is example number 7. Go ahead and scroll to 7 because we completed 2 last class. And let's go ahead and find what we need. So looking here, first thing I'm going to go ahead and find is my vertex. This is written in standard form. So I'm going to first go ahead and label my A, B, and C. So looking at it, keep in mind there is a -1 here. There's always a number in front of my variable. This is my A. This is my B. And this is my C. So it kind of helps me. So we have to know formula for vertex, okay, or which one I'm finding. I can find my H. So I'm going to go ahead and find my vertex up here. Vertex, I'm solving for H first. Formula for that is -b over 2a. And if you're looking at it, my b is a +6. So I'm going to have -6 over 2 times -1. I'm going to end up with -6 over -2, which ends up giving me a +3. So looking at it, I have my x value. So x value is right here. And then how am I finding my y value or my k value? I have to take that 3 and plug it into x. So in order for me to find my k, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. Negative. Keep in mind the 2, or your squared, your exponent, is only going to the x. So I'm going to put a parentheses around my 3, and that's what's being squared. +6 times 3 minus 8. So if I'm looking at this, going ahead and solving it, negative is going to stay there, only the 3 is being squared. So I'm going to have -9 plus 18 minus 8. I'm going to go ahead and get 9 minus 8, which gives me a +1. So this is my coordinate for my vertex. I'm going to go ahead and graph that coordinate. So looking at my graph, going over 3 and up 1, this is my vertex. And then axis of symmetry is your x value of your vertex. Keep in mind, it should be written as x equals. If you're just giving me a number, that's going to be incorrect. Your axis of symmetry is where x equals 3. So I'm going to go ahead and make my little mirror line on my 3. And I'm going to go ahead and find the rest of my information. So my intercepts, x-intercept and y-intercept, you're going to have to find both. So how do I find my x-intercept? I have to set my y equal to 0. And in this case, there is no y. I'm setting my entire equation equal to 0. Okay? Or you could think of it as f of 0 equals -x squared plus 6x minus 8. Okay, so looking at this, I don't like that negative in front, so I'm going to divide everything by -1. And I'm going to have x squared minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. No, this shouldn't be f of 0. This is just going to be 0. That's what I'm going to do for the other one. This is just 0. F of 0 is going to go for my y-intercept. All right, so solving this, can I factor this evenly? Can this be factored evenly? What would my factors be for this? If I'm looking at it, what number multiplies to give me a +8 and adds to give me a -6? -4, -2. So I'm going to have x minus 4 and x minus 2. Again, you guys have to know how to factor. Have to know how to factor. So keep in mind I'm solving for x. So x minus 4 equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. I'm adding 4 to both sides so I can isolate my x. And I'm going to get x equals a positive 4. Doing the same thing to this side. And I'm going to get x equals a positive 2. Please do not get that part wrong. So my coordinates, or my ordered pairs for my x-intercept is going to be 4, 0 and 2, 0. Ordered pairs, please make sure they are in parentheses. And I can graph this. So how am I graphing it? I'm going to go ahead and go over 4 right here, and then over 2 right here. All right, this is enough information to graph right here, but I want to make sure I'm as accurate as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and find my y-intercept. Then I can see if I could graph that, and then I'll graph it. So y-intercept, meaning I'm setting x equal to 0. Now this is where I'm setting x equal to 0. So looking at it, I'm going to go ahead. All right, so for y-intercept, you're going to have f of 0 equals negative x squared plus 6x minus 8, and you're setting all your x's to 0. However, this one's pretty easy because anytime you have your y-intercept, you're setting all your x's to 0. Your c is going to be your y-intercept always. It's always going to be your c. So that means x is 0 and your y is negative 8. Now I can go ahead and graph it. I am moving down 8, which is about right here. And if it's 1, 2, 3 units from my axis of symmetry, it needs to be 3 on the other side, my mirror image. 1, 2, 3, and it's going to go right here. So now I have a more accurate graph. So I'm going to take it and graph it, and your graph is going to look something. Keep in mind it has to be a curve like this. Don't forget your arrows. Has to have those arrows. So you have to make sure for questions like this, you're answering all the information. And yes, we are checking your graphs. So please make sure your graphs are graphed correctly. All right, looking at example number 8, same thing. They're asking for my vertex, axis of symmetry, x and y-intercept, and they want me to graph it. So this is a huge question on the test. Please make sure you know how to solve these because these will definitely be on there and there are going to be a lot of points. So looking at this question, easiest thing to find, or first thing you should find, is your vertex. So looking at it, vertex, this is written in standard form, so I have to know the formula to find my vertex. So formula to find my vertex. Finding my h and my k. Keep in mind h is x, k is your y, and h is negative b over 2a. Let's just make sure we have our a, b, and c's. It's in standard form. So a, let me write it down, is 1. B is negative 4. And C is a positive 3. So now that we know, I'm going to go ahead and write them in. I'm going to have negative 4, because that negative has to stay there, over 2 times 1. I'm going to get 4 over 2, which ends up 2 in the end. So my vertex is going to be 2, comma. And then my y for my vertex, I'm going to take that 2 and plug it into my x values. So I'm going to have 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 3. 2 squared is going to give me 4 minus 8 plus 3. I'm going to end up with negative 4 plus 3, which is going to give me a negative 1. Close my parentheses. Keep in mind it has to be written as an ordered pair. Parentheses on both ends. So I can go ahead and graph that. 2, negative 1, positive 2, go down 1 about right here. And my axis of symmetry is where x equals 2. Okay, x equals 2. That means my mirror is going to be where x equals 2. Do not just write 2. Has to be x equals 2. So looking at it, going ahead and drawing my little dotted line where x equals 2. That's representing that little mirror portion. And finding my x and y intercept. So going ahead and finding my x-intercept first. Set it equal to 0. Solve for x. So again, you have to remember how to factor. Factor, use quadratic formula, or completing the squares. So solving this one, going ahead, doing it right here. I'm going to have x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. Can I factor this? What can I use to factor? What could I use to factor this? Good, x minus 3, x minus 1. Okay, negative 3 times negative 1 gives me a positive 3, which is right here. And then they add to give me negative 4, so this can be factored. And all I'm doing is solving for x. Set them both equal to 0. Keep in mind, you're adding 3 to both sides. People still get these types of questions wrong. X equals positive 3. And x equals positive 1. So writing those as my ordered pair for my x-intercepts, I'm going to have 3, 0, and 1, 0. Keep in mind they're both in parentheses. And going ahead and graphing them. So I'm going to go ahead and go over 3 and put a dot, and go over 1, put a dot. This is enough information to graph. However, I can still find another coordinate to make it be more accurate. And remember what we said, your y-intercept, if it's written in standard form, your y-intercept is always going to be your c value. So in this case, my y-intercept is going to be, get orange, 0, 3. It's a positive 3. So graphing 0, 3, which is right here. And how many units is it for my axis of symmetry? 1, 2. Then my mirror dot should also be 2. And then I could graph a more accurate graph. So it's going to look something like this. Keep in mind it does have a curve. And I'm done. So this one's not too tricky. Please make sure you guys know how to solve it and graph it. All right, example number 9. Find the vertex, axis of symmetry, x-intercept, y-intercept, and graph. So try and do some of these on your own. Try and get there before I get there, because you guys have to practice these. So vertex, I'm going to do that first. I'm going to go ahead and find my vertex, which, looking at my vertex, I'm going to go ahead and solve for my x, which is considered my h. And I have to know that vertex formula. Solving for my h. The reason why it's h is because we're going to use it in the next lesson tomorrow. So just know it as your h, which is negative b over 2a. I'm just going to go ahead and label. This is my a, my b, and my c. Okay, so looking at it, I'm going to get negative 8 over 2 times 2. I'm going to get negative 8 over 4, which gives me a negative 2 as a whole. So for my first coordinates, I'm going to have negative 2. Okay, now for my k, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. So if x is negative 2, I'm going to go ahead and plug in for my k. 2 times negative 2. Keep in mind I'm putting in parentheses because that squared is distributing to negative 2 only. plus 8 times negative 2 plus 7. I'm going to end up with 2 times 4, which is going to give me 8. 8 times negative 2 is going to give me negative 16 plus 7, solving that. I'm going to end up with negative 8 plus 7, which gives me a negative 1. Okay, so scoot it over there, it's negative 1. So that means my y value for my vertex is going to be a negative 1. Again, I can go ahead and graph that. Graphing it, negative 2 to the right. Negative 2 to the left and 1 down. That's my point for my vertex. And now my axis of symmetry is just going to be that one dotted line that goes down the middle. Okay, keep in mind, it is your x value of your vertex. So it's where x equals negative 2. And then I'm just going to go ahead and this is where it's going to reflect. Okay, that's my reflection. All right, now solving for my x-intercepts and my y-intercepts. Let's just go ahead and do the easy one first. Looking at it, which one is going to be the easier one, my x-intercept or y-intercept? Y-intercept is always going to be the easiest one. Why? Because when I'm solving for my y-intercept, that means I am making my x 0. And if I make my x 0, what's my y-intercept going to equal? 7. So it's 0, 7. And again, I can go ahead and graph that. 0, 7 is going to be somewhere up here. And if it's 2 units from my axis of symmetry, my reflection must also be 2 units. But let's go ahead and find your x-intercept. All right, so let's go ahead and solve for x. Solving for your x-intercept. That means I'm setting everything equal to 0. So looking at it, I'm going to just, let's see where we have some more space. I'm going to write it down here. So I'm going to take 2x squared plus 8x plus 7 equals 0. So I wrote it down there at the bottom. All right, can I factor this? Okay, if I multiply 7 times 2, I'm going to get 14. And is there a number that multiplies to 14 and adds to 8? No, because it's only 7 and 2. I can't do anything about that. Okay, will I use completing the square? No, because I have a number in front of my variable. I have a 2 here. I'm only using completing the square if there's a 1 and an even number. So if I'm not using any of those options, my last option is going to be quadratic formula. Have to remember quadratic formula. It's that one song that we sing. All right, hold on. Let's write it down. What is it? X equals b square root all over 2a. Perfect. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So now we have all our information. Here's my a, here's my b, and here's my c. The same ones we labeled before. Let's go ahead and plug them in. So plugging in what we have, we're going to get negative 8 plus minus square root 8 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7 over 2 times 2. And let's go ahead and solve that. I'm still going to keep that negative 8 plus minus square root. 8 times 8 is 64. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 7, keep in mind that negative sign is going to stay, is 56. Over 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, keep going. I'm going to get negative 8 plus minus square root. Subtracting, I'm going to get 8 over 4. Now, can I simplify that radical? Yes, I can. You have to remember to simplify that radical. Simplifying the square root of 8, I'm just going to go ahead and do it right here really small. This breaks down to 4 and 2. And this is a perfect root. I'm going to get 2 as a whole. So right now, I'm going to have, I'll write it over here, negative 8 plus minus 2 times the square root of 2 over 4. Please be careful with these types of questions. You guys had this before on a test and quiz, and I don't want you guys to make the same mistake if this was the mistake you made. If you are simplifying, you have to be aware. If you're simplifying, let's say these can be simplified, you cannot just do it to this one, you have to be able to do it to both. Okay, another way you can write this is negative 8 over 4 plus minus 2 square root 2 over 4. And then you're able to identify, hey, both of them can be simplified. This can be simplified to 2. And this can also be simplified to 1 and 2. 2 and 2, and this could be simplified to 2. Okay, so 2 ways you can write this. Actually, no, this shouldn't be a 2. No, it could be 4. This could be a 1. And this could be a 2. You could write it as negative 2 over 1 and square root of 2 over 2. Oh, plus minus. Plus minus. Come on, plus minus 2 over 2. So you can write it that way. Or you can write it as negative 4 plus minus square root 2 over 2. You could write it like that. I would just leave it like this because this could be simplified for all of them. So writing it out, my x-intercept would be negative 4 plus minus square root 2 over 2 and 0. And I would leave it like that. I can't graph that, so this would be my final answer. Curve and go through that dot. Let me fix that. Oop. And that's what your graph would look like. All right, looking at it, this example, okay, this is not asking you to graph. It's asking you to find the vertex, intercept, x-intercept, and the axis of symmetry. Just scroll down. I skipped some. We're going to cover those notes tomorrow, but I just want to make sure you guys understand how to find these. Keep in mind this question is not asking you to graph, but it's asking you to find the information. So let's go ahead and find some of the information for this. Looking at it, find the vertex. Axis of symmetry is what I would do next because my axis of symmetry comes from my vertex. And then I would find my intercepts next. So looking at it, let me zoom in. Okay, finding my vertex. Again, is my H and K. That's what I'm trying to find. It is an ordered pair. So finding my vertex, I'm going to go ahead and write vertex. That's what I'm going to find first. My H and my K. And remember, it's going to be coordinates, ordered pairs. So finding my H first, that's my X value. I'm going to do negative B over 2A. And just label A is 1, B is negative 6, and my C is a negative 3. Kind of made it a little small. All right, plugging in what we have. I have negative B is negative 6 over 2 times 1. I'm going to end up with 6 over 2, positive 6 over 2, which is 3. So my vertex, I'm going to have 3 comma. And plugging 3 in for x. 3 squared minus 6 times 3 minus 3. 3 squared is going to give me 9 minus 18 minus 3. I'm going to get negative 9 minus 3, which is going to give me a negative 12. Okay, so I found my vertex. That was super easy. Nothing too hard, nothing you guys cannot do. You can all do this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do my axis of symmetry, even though it's not in the order the question's asking. As long as you find them, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and find my axis of symmetry. And who could tell me what is my axis of symmetry? Good. It can't just be 3. You have to write x equals 3. If you're just giving me 3, it's going to be wrong. So axis of symmetry, I'm just going to say AOS is going to be where x equals 3, and that's my answer. Okay, again, you have to be a little bit more specific than just saying 3. It has to be x equals 3. And again, ordered pairs. All right, the next easy one that I can find is my y-intercept. Y-intercept is where I'm making x 0. So my y-intercept is going to be what? If I'm making x 0, what's my coordinates? 0, comma, what? Negative 3. Remember, for y-intercept, you're always taking that c value. Okay, and then the last one is going to be my x-intercept. So trying to find my x-intercept, I'm going to go ahead and set it all equal to 0. So looking at it, x-intercept, that's what I'm going to go ahead and find next. So taking it, I'm going to have x squared minus 6x minus 3 equals 0. Can I factor this? Can something multiply to give me negative 3 and add to give me negative 6? No, so I can't do that.
So you have to do the quadratic.
You can use the quadratic formula, but I would use completing the squares. So I would say you choose which one you feel comfortable with, and let's see if we get the same answer. So I'm going to use completing the squares, but if you want, you can use the quadratic formula. We should still end up with the same answer. Squared minus 6x plus blank equals a positive 3 plus blank. Again, I'm doing completing the square. If you want to use quadratic formula, please go ahead and use quadratic formula. Get 6. Should be 3. Like I said, I completed the square. This is what I got for x. So if you are still using the quadratic formula, go ahead and solve and check your work.
How do you use the quadratic formula for this one?
So for this one, you are plugging in what you have. You have your a. We're still using what we wrote up here. So quadratic formula, a is 1. B is negative 6, C is negative 3. So you're still using the same values we had as before. You're just plugging it into the x equals negative b plus or minus square root. You're still going to get the same answer. But again, there are ways to remember which one's easier to use. In this case, completing the square is a lot easier. You don't get large numbers, you don't get, fractions really. It's just a pretty quick and easy one. So in this case, this is my x-intercept. So it's 3 plus minus 2 square root 3 comma 0. And that's what we're getting for x-intercept. And this would then be my answer for the question, and I'm done. Remember, it did not ask to graph. It just asked to find specific pieces of information.